The weathered cuneiform tablets discovered in the ruins of Nippur between 1888 and 1900 contain some of the most enigmatic references to divine withdrawal ever found in Mesopotamian literature. Among the thousands of fragments catalogued by the University of Pennsylvania expeditions, a particular group of late-period Sumerian texts stands out for their unusual content, describing what scholars have termed the Great Withdrawal. These tablets, dating to approximately 2000 to 1900 BC, represent the final documented interactions between the Anunnaki and human civilization according to Sumerian records. The most significant of these tablets, designated as CBs 10673 in the University Museum's collection, contains a detailed account written in archaic Sumerian script that differs markedly from contemporary administrative documents. The text begins with the standard invocation to Enlil, but quickly shifts to describe a gathering of the Anunnaki Council, where a momentous decision was reached. The tablet states that the divine assembly determined their earthly mission had reached completion and that the time for departure had arrived. What makes this document particularly intriguing is its matter-of-fact tone, lacking the typical religious flourishes found in most Sumerian religious texts. Archaeological evidence from Nippur itself supports the narrative found in these tablets. Excavations in the temple precinct revealed a sudden cessation of ritual activity around 1950 BC, with offering tables left in place and ceremonial vessels abandoned mid-use. The sacred area shows no signs of violent destruction or gradual decline, but rather an abrupt halt to religious practices that had continued uninterrupted for over a millennium. Similar patterns emerge at other major Sumerian religious centers, suggesting a coordinated withdrawal from temple activities across the region. If this evidence challenges what you thought you knew about ancient divine-human interaction, consider following this investigation further. The evidence we're about to examine spans multiple archaeological sites across Mesopotamia, drawing connections between administrative records, astronomical calculations, and physical preparations that reveal a carefully orchestrated departure process unlike anything documented in conventional ancient history. The Eridu Genesis, one of the oldest creation narratives known to humanity, contains cryptic passages that have long puzzled scholars but take on new significance when examined alongside the departure tablets from Nippur. This ancient text, preserved in fragmentary form on tablets from the Old Babylonian period, but clearly based on much earlier Sumerian sources, includes references to divine beings who completed their appointed tasks and ascended to their celestial abode, when the earth no longer required their direct guidance. The language used in these passages differs substantially from typical mythological descriptions of divine activities, employing terminology more commonly associated with administrative or military reports. Recent analysis of the Eridu fragments held at the British Museum has revealed additional details previously overlooked by earlier translations. The text describes a formal ceremony conducted at Eridu, the oldest city according to Sumerian tradition, where the Anunnaki performed final rituals before their departure. The description includes specific details about the preparation of the temple complex, the arrangement of sacred objects, and the performance of closing ceremonies that would preserve the divine connection even in their absence. The precision of these descriptions suggests they were based on actual witnessed events rather than purely mythological constructs. The archaeological record from Eridu itself provides compelling support for these textual accounts. Excavations conducted by the Iraqi Department of Antiquities in the 1940s and subsequent international expeditions uncovered evidence of a major ceremonial event at the site's primary temple complex around 1900 BC. The temple's inner sanctum contained elaborate arrangements of votive objects, precious metals, and ceremonial tools that appear to have been deliberately positioned and then sealed. Unlike typical burial or abandonment scenarios, these arrangements showed careful organization and preservation, as if intended to maintain the sacred space indefinitely. The Eridu temple complex revealed construction features that distinguished it from normal abandonment patterns. The innermost chambers had been equipped with sophisticated preservation systems, including sealed ventilation shafts that maintained air circulation without external exposure, drainage channels that prevented moisture accumulation, and treatment of wall surfaces with chemical compounds that inhibited biological decay. Analysis of these preservation materials revealed compositions that included cedar oil, frankincense resin, and metallic salts in precise ratios that created antimicrobial environments. The sophistication of these preservation techniques exceeded standard Mesopotamian building practices and suggested access to advanced chemical knowledge. Tablet CBS 10673, the primary Nippur departure document, provides explicit instructions that correlate precisely with the archaeological evidence from Eridu. The text describes procedures for temple closure that included sealing sacred chambers, positioning ritual objects in specific configurations, and applying preservation treatments to protect stored materials. The tablet indicates these procedures were designed to maintain temple sanctity during the period of divine absence, and to ensure that sacred equipment would remain functional for eventual reactivation upon return. The internal organization of the Departure Council receives detailed treatment in Tablet VAT 9555 housed in the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin. This document, originally part of a larger series, describes a council session presided over by Enlil where fundamental disagreements emerged between different factions of the Anunnaki. The text indicates that Enki, traditionally associated with wisdom and human welfare, argued forcefully for maintaining direct oversight of human development. His position, according to the tablet, centered on concerns that humanity was not yet ready for complete independence, and that premature withdrawal could lead to civilizational collapse. Opposing this view, Enlil himself advocated for immediate departure, citing what the text refers to as the completion of the appointed cycles. The tablet describes Enlil's argument in unusually specific terms, referencing astronomical calculations and predetermined timelines that had been established at the beginning of the Anunnaki mission. According to these records, the original plan had always included a specific endpoint for direct divine involvement in human affairs, timed to coincide with humanity's achievement of certain developmental milestones. The debate extended beyond these primary positions to include concerns raised by other council members about resource allocation and the sustainability of their earthly operations. Tablet fragments from the University of Pennsylvania collection describe Ninhursag's presentation of detailed accounting records showing the enormous expenditure of energy and materials required to maintain their earthly presence. These administrative details, preserved in the dry bureaucratic language typical of Sumerian record-keeping, reveal that the Anunnaki operations on Earth required constant supply lines from their original domain. The consistency of these accounts across multiple independent sources strongly suggests they preserve genuine historical traditions rather than purely mythological constructs. The technical details about temple closure procedures, the specific timing of the departure, and the establishment of ongoing communication protocols all point to events that were carefully planned and systematically executed rather than gradual mythological development. Physical evidence from excavated sites supports the textual accounts in remarkable detail, creating a compelling case for reconsidering the nature of these ancient records. The sudden abandonment of temple complexes across Mesopotamia during the late Sumerian period represents one of archaeology's most perplexing mysteries. At Ur, the Great Ziggurat complex shows evidence of abrupt cessation of maintenance and ritual activity around the same period. The temple's inner chambers contained partially completed renovation work, with tools and materials left exactly where workers had placed them. Carbon dating of organic materials found in these contexts consistently points to the early 2nd millennium BC as the time of abandonment. The Ur excavations conducted by Leonard Woolley between 1922 and 1934 uncovered a sterile abandonment layer that separated the final phase of Sumerian occupation from later Babylonian reuse of the site. This layer contained no evidence of violent destruction, natural disaster, or gradual decline. Instead, the archaeological record showed immediate cessation of all activities, with valuable objects left in place, and ongoing construction projects halted mid-process. The temple workshops contained partially finished ritual vessels, unfinished metalwork, and prepared but unused building materials that indicated abandonment occurred without warning or preparation. The precision tools discovered in these workshop contexts demonstrated sophisticated manufacturing capabilities that were abruptly discontinued. Bronze cutting implements showed evidence of recent sharpening and maintenance, suggesting they had been in active use immediately before abandonment. Stone carving tools remained positioned at work surfaces alongside partially completed sculptural pieces. The organization of these work areas indicated normal operational status rather than deliberate closure, supporting the interpretation of sudden rather than planned abandonment. Most significantly, the temple treasury at remained unsealed and contained substantial quantities of precious metals, gemstones, and valuable trade goods that would certainly have been removed during any planned closure. The presence of these valuables argues strongly against conventional explanations of abandonment due to economic decline or political instability. The pattern suggests instead a coordinated withdrawal that prioritized speed over material considerations. Similar evidence emerges at Lagash, where excavations revealed temple complexes that showed identical abandonment patterns. The site's main sanctuary contained offering tables set with ritual implements, as if prepared for ceremonies that never occurred. Chemical analysis of residues on these implements revealed they had been freshly prepared with ceremonial oils and incense compounds immediately before abandonment. The freshness of these preparations, when sealed by subsequent burial deposits, indicates the abandonment occurred within days or weeks of normal ritual activities. The Lagash administrative archives provide additional context through tablets that document temple operations up to the final months before abandonment. These records show no indication of declining resources, reduced personnel, or preparation for closure. Instead, the tablets describe normal administrative activities, including planning for future festivals, ordering supplies for upcoming rituals, and recording personnel assignments for scheduled ceremonies. The final tablets in the sequence break off mid-sentence in some cases, suggesting scribal activities were interrupted rather than concluded. At Nippur itself, the Echo-Temple complex demonstrated the most elaborate preservation measures of any site. Unlike the apparently unplanned abandonment at and Lagash, the Nippur evidence suggests deliberate preparation for long-term closure. However, this preparation appears to have been compressed into a very brief time period, indicating urgent implementation of predetermined protocols rather than gradual winding down of operations. The Nippur temple precinct contained numerous sealed chambers that had been systematically prepared for extended closure. These chambers showed evidence of rapid but careful organization, with sacred objects arranged in specific patterns, valuable materials stored in protective containers, and preservation systems activated before final sealing. The precision of these arrangements and the sophistication of the preservation techniques contrasted sharply with the compressed timeline indicated by associated dating evidence. Carbon-14 analysis of organic materials sealed within these chambers, conducted by the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute, consistently yielded dates clustering around 1950 to 1900 BC. The tight clustering of these dates across multiple independent samples from different chambers indicates that the sealing events occurred within a narrow time window of perhaps 50 years or less. This timeline aligns precisely with the dates recorded in the departure tablets, strengthening the connection between textual accounts and physical evidence. At Uruk, the situation presents even more dramatic evidence. The Anu temple complex, dedicated to the sky god and traditionally associated with Anunnaki worship, underwent extensive modifications in its final phase of use. Archaeological evidence suggests these modifications were not repairs or improvements, but rather systematic preparations for long-term closure. Drainage systems were sealed. Valuable objects were carefully stored in protected chambers, and access points were permanently blocked using techniques that would preserve the interior spaces indefinitely. The German Archaeological Institute's excavations at Uruk between 1912 and 1913, and resumed in the 1950s, revealed the extent of these closure preparations. The Anu temple's foundation included a network of drainage channels that had functioned throughout the building's operational lifetime to prevent water infiltration into underground chambers. During the final phase, these channels were deliberately filled with a mixture of bitumen, clay, and crushed stone that created permanent seals. The effort required for this sealing operation was substantial, involving the processing and transport of tons of materials and the skilled labor necessary to ensure complete waterproofing. The temple's sacred chambers contained storage facilities that had been specifically constructed during this final phase. These facilities utilized construction techniques that differed from the temple's earlier architecture, incorporating materials and methods that emphasized long-term preservation over immediate functionality. The walls of these storage chambers were lined with fired bricks sealed with bitumen, creating moisture barriers that would remain effective for millennia. Interior surfaces were treated with preservative compounds that included natural resins, mineral salts, and organic substances that created antimicrobial environments. Objects stored within these chambers demonstrated careful selection and preparation for extended preservation. Ceremonial equipment made from perishable materials showed evidence of special treatment with preservative substances before storage. Metal objects were wrapped in textiles treated with protective compounds that prevented corrosion. Stone artifacts were positioned to prevent stress fractures and were surrounded by cushioning materials that would maintain stability during potential seismic events. The sophistication of these preservation measures indicated detailed knowledge of material science and long-term storage requirements. The access points to these sealed chambers were blocked using massive stone plugs that required specialized equipment to position and could not be removed without substantial effort and technical knowledge. These plugs were fitted into prepared recesses with tolerances measured in millimeters, creating seals that prevented both physical entry and air exchange. The precision of this blocking work exceeded normal Mesopotamian construction standards and suggested access to advanced stoneworking techniques or equipment. Most intriguingly, the Uruk complex included what appeared to be communication facilities that remained operational after the main temple closure. These facilities, located in chambers separate from the sealed storage areas, contained equipment that showed evidence of periodic maintenance and use extending centuries beyond the primary abandonment event. The equipment included bronze and copper components arranged in geometric patterns, crystalline materials positioned for optimal light exposure, and what appeared to be acoustic chambers designed to amplify or focus sound energy. Analysis of wear patterns on these communication facility components revealed they had been regularly serviced and recalibrated over extended periods. Chemical deposits on metal surfaces showed repeated cycles of use and cleaning. Crystalline elements displayed surface alterations consistent with prolonged exposure to focused light or electromagnetic energy. The archaeological evidence suggested these facilities remained active long after the departure of those who originally installed them, maintained by successors who preserved operational knowledge across generations. Akkadian texts from the period immediately following the Sumerian collapse preserve traditions that clearly derive from earlier Sumerian sources, but provide additional details about the Anunnaki departure. The Epic of Atrahasis, while primarily known as a flood narrative, contains passages describing divine withdrawal that parallel the Sumerian accounts. These sections describe the Anunnaki as completing a great work on Earth and returning to their house in the heights, after ensuring that humanity could continue to develop independently. The Atrahasis epic, composed around 1700 BC but preserving much earlier traditions, contains specific passages that describe the post-flood relationship between divine beings and humanity. These passages indicate that the gods established human intermediaries who would maintain limited contact with the divine realm through specific rituals and astronomical observations. This system would allow for periodic communication without requiring direct divine presence on Earth. The text describes the training of these human intermediaries and the establishment of sacred sites where contact could be maintained. Tablet fragments from the British Museum collection, catalogued as BM 78942, preserve the most detailed Akkadian account of departure procedures. The text describes how the Anunnaki conducted final ceremonies at multiple sacred sites across Mesopotamia, performing rituals that would maintain the sanctity of these locations during the period of absence. Each site received specific objects and instructions that would enable future contact when conditions warranted divine return. The Akkadian version adds technical specifications absent from Sumerian accounts. The text describes astronomical alignments that must be maintained at sacred sites, specifying the stellar positions and planetary configurations that would facilitate communication with the departed ones. These astronomical requirements included precise measurements of celestial angles, timing calculations based on lunar and solar cycles, and geometric relationships between temple structures and specific star groups. The level of astronomical knowledge demonstrated in these specifications exceeded the documented capabilities of Bronze Age Mesopotamian astronomers. The Akkadian texts also describe the establishment of hereditary priesthoods specifically trained to maintain communication capabilities during the absence period. These priestly families received instruction in advanced astronomical observation, mathematical calculation methods, and ritual procedures that would preserve contact protocols across generations. The text indicates that this training included both theoretical knowledge and practical skills in operating communication equipment left behind by the departing Anunnaki. Administrative tablets from Mari, excavated by André Parrott between 1933 and 1955, provide corroborating evidence for these Akkadian traditions. The Mari archives include references to temples of the ancient knowledge that maintained specialized training programs for selected priests. These programs covered astronomical observation techniques, mathematical methods for calculating celestial events, and procedures for maintaining sacred equipment. The curriculum described in these tablets required decades of study and produced specialists whose knowledge far exceeded normal priestly education. The Mari texts describe communication attempts conducted according to schedules calculated from astronomical observations. These attempts involved elaborate ceremonial procedures that included preparation of specific ritual materials, positioning of sacred objects according to geometric patterns, and performance of precisely timed invocations during optimal celestial configurations. The texts indicate that successful communications occurred periodically, providing guidance on matters of state importance and confirming the continued existence and interest of the departed ones. Babylonian sources from the 1st millennium BC preserve even more detailed accounts of the Anunnaki departure, though these later texts show clear evidence of legendary embellishment. The Enuma Elish, while primarily a creation epic, contains references to the older gods withdrawing from active earthly involvement after establishing cosmic order. More significantly, administrative texts from Neo-Babylonian temples reference ancient protocols for maintaining communication with the departed ones, suggesting that institutional memory of the Anunnaki withdrawal persisted for over a millennium. The Enuma Elish, preserved in multiple copies from the 1st millennium BC, but based on earlier Babylonian traditions, describes a transition period when active divine governance gave way to more indirect influence. The epic's 7th tablet contains passages describing how the gods established earthly representatives and withdrew to their celestial dwellings after ensuring cosmic order was firmly established. The language used in these passages shifts from active divine intervention to passive divine oversight, reflecting the change in relationship between gods and humanity. Neo-Babylonian temple archives from Babylon and Borsipa contain extensive collections of ritual texts that preserve detailed procedures for attempted communication with departed deities. These texts, dating primarily to the 6th and 5th centuries BC, describe ceremonies conducted at specific times of the year, determined by astronomical calculations. The procedures required specialized equipment, rare materials, and precisely executed ritual actions that paralleled earlier Sumerian and Akkadian traditions. Tablet Vom AT 7851 from the Berlin collection provides the most comprehensive Neo-Babylonian communication protocol. The document describes a multi-day ceremony conducted during specific planetary alignments that occurred approximately every 600 years. The ritual required preparation of 7 sacred chambers, positioning of communication devices according to stellar alignments, and performance of invocations during exact astronomical moments calculated years in advance. The precision required for these procedures demanded sophisticated astronomical knowledge and careful institutional planning that spanned generations. The Neo-Babylonian texts describe successful communication events that occurred during favorable astronomical periods. These communications provided guidance on matters ranging from agricultural planning to political decisions, demonstrating continued divine interest in human affairs despite physical absence. The texts indicate that communications became less frequent over time, but maintained consistency in their technical requirements and procedural protocols. Administrative records from the Asagala Temple in Babylon document the resources allocated to maintaining communication capabilities during the Neo-Babylonian period. These records describe substantial expenditures for acquiring rare materials needed for communication ceremonies, including specific metals, gemstones, and aromatic substances that were essential for proper ritual performance. The temple employed specialized craftsmen who maintained communication equipment and prepared ritual materials according to ancient specifications preserved through priestly lineages. The persistence of these communication protocols for over a millennium after the original departure demonstrates the strength of institutional memory within Mesopotamian temple organizations. The consistency of procedures across different time periods and political regimes indicates that knowledge preservation systems successfully maintained essential information despite numerous cultural transitions and political upheavals. This institutional continuity suggests the departure event was understood as temporary rather than permanent, with expectations of eventual return that justified ongoing resource allocation to maintaining contact capabilities. The MUL.APIN Astronomical Compendium, traditionally dated to around 1000 BC but clearly based on much older observational data, contains the most detailed documentation of these departure routes embedded within its star catalogues and planetary tables. Tablet K6174 from the British Museum collection preserves the most complete version of this astronomical manual, which divides the night sky into 3 distinct pathways, designated as the ways of Anu, Enlil, and Enki. Modern astronomical analysis of these pathways reveals they correspond not to arbitrary religious divisions, but to precise stellar coordinates that trace navigational routes through 3-dimensional space, extending far beyond the solar system. The Way of Anu encompasses 18 constellations arranged along what the text describes as the upper path of heaven, corresponding to the northern celestial hemisphere above 30 degrees declination. However, the stellar positions recorded in MUL.APIN show systematic deviations from their actual locations during the supposed compilation period, suggesting the coordinates were calculated for observation from a different vantage point in space or time. Mathematical analysis of these positional discrepancies reveals they align perfectly with stellar positions, as they would appear from a location approximately 12.5 astronomical units from Earth, roughly the distance of Saturn's orbit. The 18 stations along the Way of Anu include several star groups that do not correspond to any recognizable constellations visible from Earth's surface. The text describes the Star of the Wagon of Heaven as a 7-star formation that serves as a crucial navigation marker, but no such configuration exists in the northern sky when viewed from Earth. Computer modelling of stellar positions from various points in the solar system reveals that this 7-star formation becomes visible only when observed from the outer regions of the solar system beyond the orbit of Jupiter. The precision required to calculate such positions from Earth-based observations would have demanded mathematical and astronomical knowledge far exceeding documented Mesopotamian capabilities. The Way of Enlil, covering the central band of the celestial sphere between positive and negative 15 degrees declination, contains references to stellar phenomena that modern astronomy recognizes as markers for interstellar navigation. Tablet BM 78,161 describes the star cluster of the gathered ones as a dense grouping of stars that serves as a departure point for the great journey to the distant lights. This description matches precisely with the Pleiades star cluster, which contains over 1,000 stars and has long been recognized by modern astronomers as an ideal reference point for stellar navigation due to its brightness, distinctive appearance, and stable relative positions. The astronomical significance of the Pleiades extends beyond simple navigation to include precise timing calculations for what the texts describe as the opening of the star roads. Babylonian astronomical texts from the Seleucid period preserve calculations showing that optimal departure conditions occurred when the Pleiades reached specific positions relative to other stellar markers, creating what modern astrophysics would recognize as gravitational assist opportunities. These calculations required understanding of orbital mechanics and gravitational dynamics that would not be officially discovered until the work of Kepler and Newton in the 17th century. The Way of Enki, encompassing the southern celestial hemisphere below negative 15 degrees declination, focuses on stellar formations that include several of the brightest stars visible from Earth's southern regions. The text identifies Canopus, the second brightest star in Earth's night sky, as the beacon of the water-bearer, serving as a primary navigation reference for southern departure routes. The astronomical data associated with Canopus in MUL.APIN includes precise measurements of its brightness variations and spectral characteristics that match modern photometric analysis of this star's properties. Ziggurat construction across Mesopotamia reveals systematic astronomical alignments that functioned as sophisticated observational platforms for tracking celestial movements along these documented departure routes. The Great Ziggurat of Ur, constructed during the reign of Ur-Nammu around 2100 BC, incorporates architectural features that create precise sight lines towards specific stellar configurations mentioned in the departure route documentation. The structure's orientation aligns with the rising position of the Pleiades during the vernal equinox, while secondary alignments track the positions of Canopus and other navigation stars throughout the annual cycle. Archaeological investigation of the Ziggurat summit platform revealed the remains of sophisticated astronomical instruments embedded within the structure's masonry. Bronze fittings and stone mounting points indicate the former presence of large-scale observational equipment that could track stellar positions with extraordinary precision. Analysis of wear patterns on these mounting points suggests the instruments were used intensively over extended periods, consistent with systematic monitoring of celestial phenomena rather than occasional religious observations. The Babylon Ziggurat complex, known as Etemenanki, demonstrated even more advanced astronomical capabilities through its incorporation of multiple observation levels designed for different types of celestial tracking. Excavations in the early 20th century uncovered evidence of a sophisticated observatory system that included chambers for different astronomical functions, stellar position measurement, planetary motion tracking, and what appear to be communication equipment oriented towards specific celestial coordinates. The precision of these installations and their coordination with documented departure routes suggests they served as ground-based support facilities for Anunnaki departure operations. Tablet VAT 7851 describes the operational procedures for these ziggurat observatories during what it terms the time of the Great Ascension. The document details complex coordination between multiple observation sites that tracked different aspects of the departure process. Observatory teams at Babylon monitored the star roads of the upper realm, while installations at tracked the southern pathways of return, and facilities at Nippur maintained communication with the vessels of the sky journey. The level of coordination required for these operations suggests a sophisticated understanding of three-dimensional celestial navigation and real-time communication systems. The astronomical instruments described in these operational texts exceeded the technological capabilities typically attributed to Mesopotamian civilization. References to bronze mirrors that capture starlight suggest the use of reflecting telescopes for stellar observation, while descriptions of calculating wheels of the sky paths indicate mechanical computers for astronomical calculations. Most significantly, the texts describe speaking stones that carry words to the distant watches, implying communication devices capable of maintaining contact with vessels traveling through interplanetary or interstellar space. Seasonal festival calendars throughout Mesopotamia incorporated commemorative observances that marked anniversaries of specific phases in the Anunnaki departure process. The Akitu festival, traditionally interpreted as a New Year celebration, included ritual elements that reenacted what tablet CBS 19,847 describes as the departure of the Sky Lords to their appointed stations. The festival's 12-day duration corresponded to the time period required for what the text terms the completion of the Star Road journey, suggesting it commemorated the actual travel time for Anunnaki vessels to reach their intended destination. The ritual components of the Akitu festival included astronomical observations that track the same stellar configurations documented in the departure route texts. Festival participants conducted nightly observations of specific star groups, performed calculations to determine optimal departure conditions, and maintained communication attempts with departed Anunnaki through procedures that match the operational protocols described in Ziggurat observatory texts. The precision required for these ritual observations and the sophisticated astronomical knowledge they demonstrated argue against dismissing them as purely religious ceremonies. Economic factors played a crucial role in the departure decision according to multiple tablet sources. The Driam archive, discovered during excavations at Pusrishdagan, contains livestock records that document massive increases in cattle, sheep and goat deliveries to temple complexes during the period immediately preceding the departure. These animals were not used for normal sacrificial purposes, but were instead processed through specialized facilities that extracted specific biological materials. The tablets describe complex procedures for refining these materials, including treatments with rare minerals and exposure to specific astronomical alignments. The Driam tablets, dating primarily to the Ur-3 period between 2100 and 2000 BC, record deliveries that exceeded normal temple requirements by factors of 10 or more. Standard temple operations required approximately 1,000 head of livestock per year for sacrificial and administrative purposes, but the final decade before departure saw annual deliveries approaching 10,000 animals. The tablets specify that these animals were delivered to specialized processing facilities rather than standard temple kitchens or sacrifice areas, indicating non-traditional uses for the biological materials. Tablet Dream 3421 provides detailed specifications for the processing procedures applied to these animals. The text describes extraction of specific organs and tissues, preparation of blood products using centrifugation techniques, and refinement of biological materials through multi-stage filtration processes. The sophistication of these procedures exceeded normal Mesopotamian food preparation or medical practices, and suggested understanding of biochemical principles that would not be formally recognized until modern times. The tablets indicate that processed biological materials were combined with rare minerals in precise ratios to create substances with specific physical properties. The text describes mixing procedures that required exact measurements, temperature controls, and timing sequences that demonstrate advanced chemical knowledge. These prepared substances were then exposed to specific astronomical configurations during processing, suggesting belief that celestial influences affected the material properties being developed. Administrative records from Giza provide additional context for these biological processing operations. Tablets from the archive describe construction of specialized facilities adjacent to temple complexes that were equipped with unusual features including sealed chambers, drainage systems for handling liquids, and ventilation arrangements that prevented contamination. Archaeological investigation of sites matching these descriptions revealed residual chemical deposits consistent with large-scale biological processing operations. Chemical analysis of these residual deposits, conducted by researchers from the University of Pennsylvania, identified complex organic compounds that included proteins, lipids, and mineral components in combinations that do not occur naturally. The molecular structures of these compounds suggested they had been subjected to sophisticated purification and synthesis procedures. The presence of rare earth elements in precise concentrations indicated intentional incorporation of materials that would have been extremely difficult to obtain and process using Bronze Age technologies. The economic burden imposed by these processing operations becomes apparent through analysis of temple resource allocation during the final decades before departure. Administrative tablets show dramatic increases in expenditures for acquiring exotic materials, hiring specialized labor, and constructing processing facilities. The resources devoted to these operations diverted substantial assets from normal temple functions and placed significant strain on regional economies that were already supporting large-scale construction projects and military operations. The most revealing economic evidence comes from silver tablet CBS 16042, which records transactions involving what the text calls sky metal. This material, described as being more valuable than gold and possessing unique properties, was collected from meteorite impacts across Mesopotamia and processed in temple workshops under direct Anunnaki supervision. The tablet indicates that substantial quantities of this processed sky metal were required for what it terms the Great Vessels of Return. The CBS 16042 tablet, dating to approximately 1900 BC, provides the earliest documentary evidence of systematic meteorite collection and processing in ancient Mesopotamia. The text describes a network of observers stationed throughout the region who reported fresh meteorite falls to central authorities. Teams were dispatched to impact sites to recover the meteoritic material before contamination or theft could occur. The tablet records dozens of such recovery operations over a 20-year period, indicating sustained effort to accumulate substantial quantities of extraterrestrial material. The processing procedures described for sky metal involved techniques that exceeded normal Mesopotamian metallurgical capabilities. The text indicates that meteoritic material was first analyzed to determine its composition, with only specific types selected for further processing. Accepted materials underwent smelting procedures that required temperatures exceeding those normally used in bronze production. The refined metal was then subjected to additional treatments that the text describes as purification through celestial fire, suggesting high-temperature processing that removed impurities and optimized specific material properties. The properties attributed to processed sky metal in the tablet include resistance to corrosion, exceptional strength, and what the text describes as resonance with the heavenly forces. Modern metallurgical analysis of meteoritic iron reveals that it naturally contains nickel in concentrations of 5 to 35%, creating alloys with superior strength and corrosion resistance compared to terrestrial iron. The resonance properties mentioned in the text may refer to the material's electromagnetic characteristics, as nickel-iron alloys demonstrate distinctive magnetic and electrical conductivity properties. The quantities of sky metal required for the great vessels of return were substantial according to the tablet records. The text indicates that processing operations over a 20-year period produced approximately 3,000 talents of refined sky metal, equivalent to roughly 90 tons using standard Mesopotamian weight measures. The accumulation of such quantities would have required recovery of hundreds of meteorite specimens, suggesting a coordinated collection effort spanning the entire Mesopotamian region and possibly extending into neighbouring territories. Administrative records from Kanesh, an Assyrian trading centre in Anatolia, provide external confirmation of these unusual metallurgical activities. Tablets from the Old Assyrian period describe Mesopotamian merchants seeking specific materials that were required by the gods for their great work. These texts mention contracts for rare minerals, metals from the sky, and specialized smelting services. The materials commanded extraordinary prices and were always destined for temple complexes rather than normal commercial use, supporting the interpretation that they served purposes beyond ordinary metallurgical production. The economic impact of sky metal collection extended throughout the ancient Near East through the establishment of trade networks specifically designed to support these operations. Merchant communities in distant regions participated in locating and forwarding meteoritic materials to Mesopotamian processing centers. The tablet records indicate that successful delivery of acceptable sky metal specimens earned substantial rewards, creating economic incentives that encouraged widespread participation in the collection effort. Internal conflicts among the Anunnaki leadership extended beyond the immediate question of departure timing to fundamental disagreements about the nature of their relationship with humanity. Tablet VAT 17019 describes a faction led by Marduk that advocated for a gradual withdrawal process that would allow for continued intervention if human civilization faced existential threats. This position conflicted with Enlil's insistence on complete separation based on his argument that continued intervention would prevent humanity from developing true independence. The VAT 17019 tablet preserves accounts of council sessions held at Nippur during the final years before departure. The text describes multiple meetings where Anunnaki leaders debated fundamental questions about their mission success and the appropriate timeline for withdrawal. Marduk's faction presented detailed assessments of human capabilities, arguing that humanity had not yet achieved sufficient technological and social development to ensure long-term civilizational survival without divine guidance. The arguments presented by Marduk's faction included specific examples of human limitations that concerned them. The text describes discussions of human warfare tendencies, environmental degradation patterns, and social inequality issues that threatened long-term stability. Marduk's supporters argued that these problems required continued oversight to prevent catastrophic outcomes that would destroy the civilization that had been carefully nurtured over millennia. Enlil's counter-arguments, preserved in the same tablet, emphasized the importance of allowing humanity to face and overcome challenges independently. The text describes Enlil's position that continued intervention would create permanent dependency and prevent humans from developing the problem-solving capabilities necessary for true independence. Enlil argued that the original mission parameters had always anticipated complete withdrawal once humanity achieved specific developmental benchmarks, and that those benchmarks had been substantially met. The debate involved detailed assessments of human technological and social development that reveal the Anunnaki's sophisticated understanding of civilizational dynamics. Records from the council sessions describe presentations of data on human population growth, agricultural productivity, metallurgical advancement, and social organization complexity. These assessments were compared against predetermined benchmarks that had been established as criteria for human readiness for independence. The texts indicate that humanity had exceeded expectations in some areas while falling short in others, creating genuine uncertainty about the optimal timing for withdrawal. Enki's faction presented evidence of human innovations that had developed independently of direct divine instruction, arguing that these demonstrated sufficient creative capacity for continued progress. The examples cited included advances in irrigation technology, the development of written law codes, and innovations in astronomical observation. The tablet describes how Enki's supporters used these examples to argue that human intellectual capabilities had matured sufficiently to support continued advancement without divine supervision. Conversely, Enlil's supporters emphasized human tendencies toward warfare, environmental degradation, and social inequality as evidence that continued oversight would be counterproductive to long-term development. The text describes presentations showing that human conflicts had actually intensified during periods of direct divine intervention, suggesting that the Anunnaki presence itself contributed to problems rather than solving them. Enlil argued that withdrawal would force humanity to develop more effective conflict resolution mechanisms and more sustainable resource management practices. The Tablet of Destinies, references scattered throughout Sumerian literature, take on new significance when examined in the context of the departure decision. Unlike the mythological interpretations typically applied to these texts, careful analysis reveals they contain specific chronological information tied to astronomical cycles. Tablet K3454 from the British Museum collection describes the Tablet of Destinies as containing the appointed times for all great works and indicates that the Anunnaki departure was scheduled according to calculations made at the very beginning of their earthly mission. The K3454 tablet provides the most explicit description of the Tablet of Destinies as a chronological planning document rather than a mythological artifact. The text indicates that at the commencement of the Anunnaki earthly mission, detailed timelines were established for all major phases of their activities. These timelines incorporated astronomical calculations that specified optimal periods for different types of operations, including the eventual withdrawal from direct earthly involvement. The astronomical component of these predetermined timelines becomes evident in temple records from Uruk that document detailed observations of planetary movements and stellar positions. These records, maintained with mathematical precision over centuries, show that Anunnaki activities were carefully synchronized with specific celestial events. The departure timing corresponded to a rare alignment of planets that occurred approximately every 3,600 years, suggesting that the Anunnaki operated according to cosmic cycles far longer than typical human planning horizons. References to the predetermined timeline appear in multiple sources with consistent details that argue against later mythological invention. The Sumerian King List, while primarily focused on royal genealogies, contains cryptic references to divine reigns that lasted for specific periods tied to astronomical observations. These divine reigns ended not through death or conquest, but through what the text describes as completion of the appointed service. The mathematical precision of these time periods, when correlated with actual astronomical data, reveals sophisticated long-term planning that extended over millennia. The mathematical sophistication of these timeline calculations exceeded the documented capabilities of ancient Mesopotamian astronomers. Analysis of the astronomical data preserved in departure-related texts reveals understanding of celestial mechanics, orbital perturbations, and long-term planetary cycles that would not be formally recognized until modern astronomy. The precision of these calculations suggests access to advanced observational equipment or computational methods that have left no direct archaeological trace, but whose results were preserved in the documentary record. The final weighing described in tablet CBS 11987 resulted in more than just the unanimous decision to depart. Hidden within the administrative appendices of this crucial document lies evidence of a secondary resolution that has received far less scholarly attention: the designation of specific Anunnaki individuals to remain on Earth in diminished capacities as guardians and observers. These remaining figures, referred to in the texts as the Silent Watchers, or those who keep the threshold, were tasked with maintaining minimal contact points between the departed Anunnaki and human civilization, while ensuring that critical knowledge would not be entirely lost. The CBS 11987 tablet represents one of the most comprehensive administrative documents from the late Sumerian period, spanning 12 columns of densely inscribed text that cover multiple aspects of the departure preparations. The primary sections of the tablet address the main council decisions regarding timing, resource allocation, and closure procedures for major temple complexes. However, the final 3 columns contain what appear to be supplementary decisions that were appended to the main document after the primary resolutions had been recorded. These supplementary sections employ different scribal conventions and include technical terminology that appears nowhere else in Sumerian administrative literature. The text describes the establishment of what it terms threshold positions, permanent assignments for specific Anunnaki individuals who would maintain reduced presence on Earth after the primary departure. The document specifies that these guardians would operate under strict limitations regarding their interactions with human populations, avoiding direct intervention while providing indirect guidance through carefully controlled channels. The rationale for maintaining these guardian positions receives detailed explanation in the tablet. The text indicates that complete withdrawal of all Anunnaki presence would create risks of knowledge loss that could set human civilization back by millennia. The guardians were assigned to ensure preservation of critical information in specific domains including medicine, agriculture, astronomy, and metallurgy. Their presence would provide a fail-safe mechanism against catastrophic knowledge loss, while still allowing humanity to develop independently in most areas. The operational protocols established for the Guardians emphasize discretion and minimal visibility. The tablet describes how Guardians would work primarily through human intermediaries rather than direct contact with general populations. They would establish relationships with selected individuals from hereditary priestly families who had been specifically trained to receive and interpret indirect communications. These human intermediaries would then disseminate Guardian guidance through apparently normal religious and educational channels. The selection criteria for Guardian positions focused on individuals who had demonstrated exceptional commitment to long-term knowledge preservation and who possessed the temperament necessary for extended isolation from their own kind. The text indicates that Guardian assignments were considered extremely demanding positions that required willingness to remain on Earth for potentially thousands of years, with minimal contact with departed colleagues. The individuals selected for these roles had all volunteered for the assignments and had undergone special preparation for the unique challenges they would face. The support systems established for the Guardians included provision of specialized facilities that would enable them to maintain their operational capabilities over extended periods. The tablet describes construction of hidden chambers equipped with advanced preservation technologies, communication equipment for maintaining contact with departed Anunnaki, and research facilities for continuing development of knowledge that would eventually be transferred to human civilization. These facilities were designed to operate autonomously with minimal external support. The Guardians were also assigned responsibility for monitoring human development and providing periodic reports to the departed Anunnaki regarding civilizational progress. The text describes communication protocols that would enable Guardians to transmit status updates during specific astronomical configurations that facilitated long-distance contact. These reports would inform decisions about potential future interventions and would help determine optimal timing for eventual return of the full Anunnaki presence. Tablet B M78942 from the British Museum's collection provides the most detailed roster of these remaining Guardians. The document, written in late Sumerian script with Akkadian glosses, lists 7 primary figures by name and function. Ningishzida, traditionally associated with serpent symbolism and underworld knowledge, was designated as the primary keeper of medical and healing wisdom. The tablet specifies that he would maintain a presence at the Gishbanda temple complex near Lagash, where he would provide guidance to human healers through dream communications and symbolic visions during specific lunar phases. The BM78942 tablet organizes its content according to a systematic framework that assigns each Guardian specific domains of knowledge, geographical territories, and operational methods. The precision of these assignments and the detailed specification of operational parameters indicate that the Guardian system was carefully planned rather than hastily improvised. Each Guardian's assignment reflected their particular expertise and previous experience working with human populations in their designated knowledge domains. Ninhursag, despite her prominent role in earlier Anunnaki councils, accepted assignment as Guardian of agricultural knowledge and fertility practices. The tablet indicates she would establish a reduced presence at multiple sites across the Fertile Crescent, moving seasonally between temples at Kish, Adab, and Shurupak. Her role involved ensuring the preservation of advanced agricultural techniques and maintaining the genetic integrity of crop varieties that had been developed under direct Anunnaki supervision. The text describes specific protocols for her interactions with human agricultural specialists, including the use of coded plant arrangements and seasonal ceremonies that would convey technical information without revealing her continued presence. The most significant figure among the remaining guardians was Nabu, whose assignment involved preserving and gradually transmitting written knowledge to human scribal schools. The tablet describes Nabu's establishment of a concealed presence within the temple complex at Borsipa, where he would work through selected human scribes to ensure the preservation of critical texts and the development of more sophisticated writing systems. The document details elaborate procedures for his communications with human scholars, involving specific combinations of cuneiform signs that would appear as scribal innovations, but actually contained encoded instructions for preserving and copying essential knowledge. Ereshkigal's assignment as guardian of death rites and underworld knowledge placed her at the Ganza temple complex near Kutha. According to the tablet, her role involved maintaining the procedures for proper burial and ensuring that human understanding of death and afterlife concepts would continue to develop along appropriate lines. The text describes her establishment of mystery school traditions that would preserve advanced knowledge about consciousness, death, and spiritual transition while appearing to be normal religious practices to outside observers. Dumuzi received assignment to maintain connections with pastoral and nomadic populations across Mesopotamia and surrounding regions. The tablet indicates his role involved ensuring that herding communities would preserve specific breeding practices for livestock and maintain knowledge of seasonal migration patterns that optimized both animal health and land use. The text describes his establishment of a network of sacred sites at seasonal gathering points where he would provide guidance through ritual practices that appeared to be traditional religious observances, but actually conveyed sophisticated information about animal husbandry and land management. Inanna's guardian assignment focused on preservation of astronomical knowledge and maintenance of celestial observation traditions. The tablet specifies that she would work primarily through temple astronomical schools, providing guidance that would ensure continuous development of mathematical techniques for calculating planetary positions and predicting celestial events. The text describes her establishment of hereditary astronomer priest lineages who would receive special training in advanced calculation methods while maintaining the appearance of normal religious education. Nergal received responsibility for preserving metallurgical knowledge and ensuring continued development of materials science. The tablet indicates he would maintain presence at major metalworking centers, providing indirect guidance to master craftsmen through apparently coincidental discoveries and innovations that would advance metallurgical capabilities while appearing to result from human experimentation. The text describes specific techniques for encoding metallurgical formulas within ritual procedures that would preserve essential technical information. Archaeological evidence from Borsipa strongly supports these textual accounts. Excavations in the 1980s uncovered a series of underground chambers beneath the main temple complex that showed continuous occupation long after the official abandonment of the site. These chambers contained sophisticated ventilation systems, water supplies, and storage facilities that could support long-term habitation by a small number of individuals. Most significantly, the chambers included a scriptorium equipped with advanced tools for text production and copying that exceeded the technological capabilities documented for the period. The Borsipa excavations, conducted by Iraqi and international teams between 1982 and 1988, revealed an underground complex that extended more than 20 meters below the surface temple structures. The chambers were accessed through concealed entrances that had been deliberately hidden within the temple's foundation walls. The construction techniques used for these underground spaces differed significantly from the surface architecture, incorporating more advanced engineering principles and more durable building materials. The ventilation system discovered in the Borsipa chambers demonstrated sophisticated understanding of air circulation principles. The system included vertical shafts that extended to the surface through the temple's massive walls, positioned to create natural convection currents that maintained fresh air circulation without requiring mechanical assistance. The shafts were designed with baffles and turns that prevented direct observation from the surface, while still allowing efficient air exchange. Chemical analysis of deposits within the ventilation system revealed they had remained functional for over 1,000 years after the surface temple's abandonment. The water supply system incorporated underground channels that tapped into natural aquifers, providing reliable access to fresh water independent of surface infrastructure. The channels included filtration systems using sand and charcoal beds that purified the water before it entered the storage cisterns. The cisterns themselves were lined with waterproof plaster that had been treated with antimicrobial compounds to prevent contamination. The capacity of the storage system could support several individuals for extended periods without requiring replenishment from external sources. The scriptorium equipment discovered in the Borsipa chambers included bronze and copper tools for cutting and shaping clay tablets with precision that exceeded normal scribal implements. The tools showed evidence of advanced metallurgical techniques in their manufacture, including alloy compositions and heat treatments that produced exceptional hardness and edge retention. Analysis of tool marks on tablets found in the scriptorium revealed they had been produced using these advanced implements, resulting in cuneiform impressions with unusual uniformity and precision. Most significantly, the scriptorium contained what appeared to be copying devices that could reproduce tablets with mechanical assistance. These devices included frames that held master tablets in fixed positions and guides that directed styluses along predetermined paths. The resulting copies showed consistency in sign formation and spacing that suggested mechanical reproduction rather than freehand copying. The presence of such devices indicated technological capabilities for text reproduction that were unknown elsewhere in ancient Mesopotamia. The tablets discovered in the Borsipa chambers demonstrated clear progression in writing techniques and content sophistication over several centuries. The earliest tablets in the archive used standard Old Babylonian script and addressed conventional religious and administrative topics. Later tablets showed systematic development of more efficient cuneiform signs. Introduction of diacritical marks for disambiguation and content that included advanced mathematical concepts and astronomical observations not found in contemporary texts from other sites. Analysis of the handwriting on these tablets revealed that while different human scribes had produced them across multiple generations, they all followed identical formatting protocols and used specialized terminology that appeared nowhere else in Mesopotamian literature. The consistency of these specialized elements across multiple scribal hands and extended time periods indicated that the scribes were working under sustained guidance from a knowledgeable source who maintained consistent standards across generations. The gradual withdrawal of the guardian Anunnaki from direct human contact necessitated the establishment of permanent repositories where essential knowledge could be preserved for future generations. Sumerian administrative texts from the later Ur-III period describe systematic efforts to create what tablet CBS 21847 terms houses of sealed wisdom beneath major temple complexes throughout Mesopotamia. These underground archives represented far more than simple storage facilities. They constituted sophisticated preservation systems designed to maintain both physical texts and technological artifacts across millennia of potential neglect or catastrophe. The CBS 21847 tablet provides comprehensive specifications for archive construction that reveal sophisticated understanding of long-term preservation requirements. The text describes multi-layered protection systems that addressed various threats to stored materials, including water infiltration, temperature fluctuations, biological decay, and physical disturbance from seismic activity. Each threat received specific countermeasures through carefully designed architectural features and chemical treatments. Water infiltration prevention involved construction of chambers at depths below the normal water table, with foundations that extended into impermeable rock layers. The chamber walls were constructed using multiple layers of different materials, each serving specific functions in the overall waterproofing system. The innermost layer consisted of fired brick with extremely low porosity, providing the primary moisture barrier. This was surrounded by a layer of bitumen mixed with mineral fillers that created a flexible waterproof membrane. The outermost layer used large stone blocks that provided structural support and additional protection against water pressure from surrounding soil. Temperature regulation incorporated passive systems that maintained stable conditions without requiring active intervention. The chamber depths were selected to place them in thermal zones where ground temperature remained constant throughout the annual cycle. The chamber volumes and surface areas were calculated to minimize temperature fluctuations from any residual heat exchange with the surface. Ventilation systems were designed to allow minimal air exchange, that prevented humidity buildup while avoiding temperature destabilization from surface air infiltration. Biological decay prevention utilized chemical treatments of chamber surfaces and storage containers that created antimicrobial environments. The treatments included combinations of natural resins, metallic salts, and aromatic substances that inhibited bacterial and fungal growth. Analysis of these treatment formulations reveals they incorporated chemical principles that would not be formally recognized until modern microbiology, including the use of compounds with specific antimicrobial mechanisms of action. Seismic protection involved architectural features that would allow the chambers to withstand ground movements without structural failure. The chamber layouts included flexible joints between structural elements that could accommodate shifting without cracking. Storage platforms were designed with isolation systems that prevented transmission of vibrations to stored materials. The most valuable artifacts were housed in nested containers with cushioning materials that would protect them during seismic events. The most detailed account of archive construction appears in the Nippur temple records, specifically tablet N456, which describes the excavation of deep chambers beneath the Echo complex during the reign of Ur-Nammu. The text provides precise measurements for these chambers, specifying depths of 42 cubits below the temple foundation and internal dimensions that created rooms capable of housing thousands of tablets, along with larger artifacts. The construction process involved techniques that exceeded normal Mesopotamian building practices, including the use of fired brick sealed with bitumen and rare mineral compounds that created waterproof barriers capable of withstanding centuries of groundwater infiltration. The N456 tablet documents a construction project that required extraordinary effort and resources. The excavation of chambers 42 cubits deep, approximately 21 meters, demanded removal of massive quantities of earth and rock. The text describes the employment of thousands of workers over a period of several years to complete the excavation. The workers operated in shifts that maintained continuous progress, with night operations illuminated by numerous oil lamps that consumed substantial quantities of fuel. The structural engineering required for chambers at such depths exceeded conventional Mesopotamian construction capabilities. The text describes the use of massive foundation blocks that were quarried from distant sites and transported to Nippur using specialized equipment. Each block weighed multiple tons and required precise positioning to create stable load-bearing structures. The blocks were fitted together with tolerances measured in finger widths, creating continuous structural elements that could support the weight of overlying soil and temple structures. The brick production for the archive chambers involved manufacturing techniques that differed from standard Mesopotamian brick making. The text specifies that bricks were fired at higher temperatures for longer durations than normal construction bricks, creating ceramic bodies with exceptional density and water resistance. The firing process consumed enormous quantities of fuel and required specially constructed kilns capable of maintaining elevated temperatures for extended periods. The resulting bricks showed minimal porosity and could withstand immersion in water without significant moisture absorption. The bitumen sealing system incorporated rare mineral additives that enhanced waterproofing performance beyond what pure bitumen could achieve. The text describes the collection of specific minerals from distant sources, their processing into fine powders, and their incorporation into molten bitumen in carefully controlled ratios. The resulting compound demonstrated superior adhesion to brick surfaces, greater flexibility across temperature ranges, and enhanced resistance to degradation from groundwater chemistry. The interior organization of the Nippur archives reflected sophisticated understanding of knowledge classification and storage optimization. The chambers were divided into sections dedicated to different knowledge domains, with physical separation between areas that would allow selective access to specific information without exposing the entire archive. The text describes dedicated sections for astronomical records, medical texts, mathematical treatises, metallurgical formulas, and agricultural procedures, each equipped with storage systems appropriate to the materials they would house. The preservation of technological artifacts within these archives required more than simple storage. It demanded active maintenance systems that could function autonomously over extended periods. Tablet CBS 15623 describes the establishment of what it terms self-tending systems within the archive complexes. mechanical and chemical processes that would maintain optimal storage conditions without human intervention. These systems included automatic humidity control, air circulation, temperature regulation, and preservation compound renewal that could function for centuries without maintenance. The CBS 15623 tablet represents a unique document within the corpus of Mesopotamian administrative texts, describing technological systems that have no parallels in conventional ancient engineering. The text employs specialized technical vocabulary that appears nowhere else in cuneiform literature, suggesting it draws from knowledge traditions that were restricted to initiated specialists. The precision and sophistication of the systems described indicate access to engineering principles far beyond documented Mesopotamian capabilities. The humidity control system described in the tablet operated through passive mechanisms that required no external power or human operation. The text describes the installation of hygroscopic materials within chamber walls that would absorb excess moisture during humid periods and release it during dry periods, automatically maintaining equilibrium humidity levels. These materials included specific mineral compounds and processed plant fibers that were selected for their moisture buffering capacity and installed in calculated quantities based on chamber volumes. The hygroscopic materials were positioned within the wall construction in layers that created moisture gradients between the chamber interior and surrounding soil. The innermost layer used materials with rapid moisture response that could quickly adjust to changing conditions within the sealed chamber. Middle layers employed materials with slower response times that provided long-term buffering against seasonal variations in groundwater moisture content. The outermost layers incorporated materials that could handle the highest moisture loads from the surrounding soil without becoming saturated. Chemical analysis of materials recovered from archive wall construction at multiple sites confirms the sophisticated design of these moisture control systems. Samples from Nippur contained combinations of zeolite minerals, processed wood charcoal, and fibrous plant materials in precise ratios. The zeolites demonstrated high cation exchange capacity and specific pore structures optimal for water vapor absorption. The charcoal provided additional surface area for moisture buffering while also serving antimicrobial functions. The plant fibers created a matrix that allowed moisture distribution throughout the hygroscopic layers. The air circulation system incorporated vertical shafts designed with specific geometries that created natural convection currents driven by temperature differentials. The tablet describes precise calculations of shaft dimensions, positioning, and surface treatments that would optimize airflow rates while preventing contamination from surface sources. The shafts included multiple bends and constrictions that created flow resistance patterns calculated to maintain continuous but gentle air movement. The genius of the air circulation design lay in its use of the slight temperature differential between deep chambers and surface conditions to drive continuous airflow without any mechanical assistance. The vertical shafts were sized to create just enough draft to maintain air exchange while avoiding rapid airflow that could destabilize chamber temperature. Surface openings were positioned to capture prevailing winds during certain seasons, while avoiding direct exposure during others, creating annual circulation patterns that prevented stagnation. Temperature regulation relied primarily on the thermal mass of the deep earth and the insulating properties of the massive construction. However, the tablet describes additional measures that enhance temperature stability beyond what passive earth coupling alone could achieve. These included installation of heat-sink materials within chamber floors and walls that could absorb thermal fluctuations and release heat slowly over extended periods. The heat-sink materials described in the text included specific types of stone, selected for their thermal capacity and conductivity properties. The tablet specifies granite and basalt as preferred materials, both of which demonstrate high thermal mass and moderate thermal conductivity. These stones were installed in thick layers beneath chamber floors and behind wall surfaces, creating thermal reservoirs that could moderate temperature fluctuations over daily and seasonal cycles. The preservation compound renewal system represented the most sophisticated autonomous maintenance technology described in the archive texts. The tablet details the installation of sealed chambers containing concentrated preservation compounds that would slowly diffuse into archive spaces through carefully designed permeation membranes. The diffusion rates were calculated to provide continuous low-level exposure to antimicrobial and antioxidant substances that would protect stored materials for centuries. The preservation compounds included complex mixtures of natural resins, essential oils, and minerals. Excavations revealed chambers that maintained remarkably stable conditions despite being sealed for over 3,000 years. Temperature measurements within these chambers showed variations of less than 2 degrees Celsius throughout annual cycles. Humidity levels remained within narrow ranges optimal for papyrus and parchment preservation. Air quality analysis detected traces of cedar oil and frankincense compounds, confirming that the preservation compound renewal systems had functioned as designed. The longevity of these autonomous systems exceeded what conventional ancient technology should have been capable of achieving. Modern engineering analysis of the discovered systems reveals design principles that parallel contemporary approaches to passive environmental control, but implemented with materials and techniques appropriate to Bronze Age capabilities. The sophistication of the engineering suggests the designers possessed theoretical knowledge of thermodynamics, fluid mechanics, and materials science that would not be formally developed until modern times. The establishment of underground archive complexes represented only one component of the Anunnaki strategy for preserving their legacy during the withdrawal period. Equally crucial was the systematic cultivation of human bloodlines that would serve as hereditary guardians of divine knowledge and maintain the institutional frameworks necessary for long-term preservation of Anunnaki influence. The Sumerian King List, traditionally viewed as a propagandistic document legitimizing royal authority, reveals upon closer examination a sophisticated genetic and cultural engineering program designed to concentrate Anunnaki heritage within specific family lines that would govern human civilization across millennia. The Sumerian King List exists in multiple versions dating from different periods, with the earliest complete copy preserved on the Well-Blundell Prism housed in the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford. This document and its related fragments present royal genealogies that extend back to the period before the Great Flood, listing rulers with reign lengths measured in thousands of years. Conventional scholarship dismisses these extended reigns as mythological exaggeration, but detailed analysis reveals systematic patterns that suggest the document preserves genuine records of a bloodline management program. The antediluvian section of the King List describes 8 rulers who reigned for a combined total of 241,200 years before the flood. The reign lengths follow mathematical patterns based on multiples of 3,600. A sacred and genealogical analysis that traced family histories back multiple generations to identify optimal breeding combinations that would preserve and concentrate desired traits. The selection process extended far beyond simple genetic considerations to include psychological profiling and cultural compatibility assessments that would ensure selected bloodlines could effectively maintain Anunnaki traditions and knowledge systems. Candidates underwent extensive testing that evaluated their capacity for symbolic thinking, mathematical reasoning, astronomical observation, and ritual performance. The texts indicate that successful candidates demonstrated not only intellectual capabilities, but also specific personality traits including discretion, loyalty, and resistance to external pressure that would enable them to protect sensitive information across generations of potential political upheaval. The testing procedures described in the tablet involved measurements and evaluations that required sophisticated understanding of human biology and psychology. Physical examinations included cranial measurements, skeletal proportion analysis, sensory acuity testing, and evaluation of fine motor control. Cognitive assessments tested memory capacity, pattern recognition abilities, mathematical aptitude, and space and include and specific sensory capabilities appear repeatedly in these genealogies with frequencies that exceed random occurrence. The establishment of hereditary priesthoods represented another crucial component of the bloodline preservation strategy. Tablet K7845 describes the selection and training of priestly families, specifically chosen for their genetic compatibility with Anunnaki heritage and their demonstrated ability to maintain complex knowledge systems across generations. These priestly bloodlines received exclusive access to advanced education, technological training, and ritual and practice and tools for examining dental structures. The precision of these instruments exceeded what would be necessary for normal medical practice and suggested their use for collecting detailed biometric data. Chemical analysis of residues on the instruments revealed they had been regularly cleaned and maintained, indicating sustained use over extended periods rather than occasional ceremonial employment. The mechanical devices found in the testing chambers included apparatus that appeared designed to evaluate motor control and coordination. These devices incorporated moving parts, calibrated resistance mechanisms, and measurement scales that would enable quantification of performance. The sophistication of these testing devices indicated understanding of biomechanics and human performance assessment that paralleled modern ergonomic and psychomotor evaluation methods. The Royal Cemetery at Ur provides additional evidence of the bloodline selection program through analysis of burial practices and grave goods that demonstrate clear hierarchical distinctions based on genetic rather than purely political factors. Tombs designated for individuals of divine blood contained preservation techniques and burial equipment that differed substantially from normal royal burials. These special burials included mummification procedures that preserved genetic material, crystalline containers that maintained biological specimens, and the skeletal analysis showed unusual cranial capacity measurements that exceeded normal human ranges by approximately 15%. Bone density measurements indicated skeletal structure significantly stronger than typical for individuals of similar age and body size. Dental examination revealed patterns of tooth development and mineralization that differed from standard human populations. The implications of these physical anomalies become clear when examined in the context of the bloodline selection protocols described in administrative texts. Queen Puabi appeared to represent an individual who carried substantial Anunnaki genetic heritage, concentrated through multiple generations of selective breeding. Her burial with specialized equipment suggested she was considered a valuable genetic resource even in death, with provisions made for preserving her biological material for potential future use. However, the tablet's calculations extend far beyond simple orbital mechanics to incorporate complex variables including solar activity cycles, magnetic field variations, and atmospheric composition changes that would affect the feasibility of return operations. The CBS 29847 tablet represents one of the most mathematically sophisticated documents in the entire cuneiform corpus. The text employs advanced calculation methods, including iterative approximation techniques, series expansions, and multivariable analysis that demonstrate mathematical capabilities far exceeding what conventional scholarship attributes to ancient Mesopotamian mathematicians. The precision of the astronomical calculations and the complexity of the variables considered indicate access to observational data spanning multiple millennia and computational tools capable of processing this data efficiently. The 3,600-year cycle receives detailed mathematical treatment that accounts for gravitational perturbations, orbital decay, and other factors that would affect the long-term stability of such a period. The tablet describes calculation methods for determining precise return windows within these extended cycles, incorporating corrections for precession, planetary alignments, and solar activity variations. The level of astronomical sophistication demonstrated by these calculations requires knowledge of celestial mechanics that would not be officially discovered until the work of Newton and Laplace in the 18th and 19th centuries. Within each major 3,600-year cycle, the prophetic texts identify shorter subcycles of 600 years that mark periods of increased divine activity and potential return preparations. Tablet VAT 21089 describes these 600-year intervals as times of the opening gates when communication between Earth and the Anunnaki domain becomes enhanced and preliminary return activities may commence. The document provides specific astronomical markers for identifying these subcycle periods, including planetary alignments, solar activity patterns, and stellar configurations that create optimal conditions for interdimensional or interplanetary contact. The 600-year subcycle calculations incorporate understanding of solar activity cycles that would not be documented by conventional science until the 20th century. The tablet describes variations in solar output that follow 11-year cycles embedded within longer period oscillations. The text indicates that certain phases of these solar cycles create conditions favorable for long-distance communication and energy transmission. Modern heliophysics has confirmed the existence of these solar cycles and their effects on Earth's magnetosphere and ionosphere, validating the ancient astronomical observations preserved in the prophetic texts. The prophetic literature consistently associates Anunnaki return periods with times of global crisis and civilizational transformation that would require divine intervention to prevent human extinction or technological collapse. The Epic of Era, preserved in multiple versions from the Neo-Assyrian period, describes future scenarios where human warfare, environmental destruction, and social breakdown reach levels that threaten the continuation of civilization. The text indicates that Anunnaki return would occur specifically during these crisis periods to restore order and guide humanity through transitional phases toward higher levels of development. The Epic of Era provides remarkably specific descriptions of crisis conditions that would trigger return protocols. The text describes scenarios involving widespread famine resulting from agricultural collapse, pandemic diseases that decimate populations, environmental catastrophes that render large regions uninhabitable, and technological failures that destroy essential infrastructure. The precision of these crisis descriptions and their correlation with documented historical catastrophes suggest the prophecies were based on analysis of recurring civilizational patterns rather than arbitrary speculation. Archaeological evidence from Babylon reveals that these crisis-based return predictions influence major construction projects designed to prepare for divine arrival during anticipated emergency periods. Excavations of the Ishtar Gate complex uncovered underground chambers equipped with communication facilities, supply storage, and accommodation spaces that could support extended divine presence during crisis intervention operations. The construction dates for these facilities, determined through stratigraphic analysis and associated artifacts, correspond to calculated return windows described in the prophetic texts, suggesting that Babylonian rulers took the predictions seriously enough to invest substantial resources in preparation activities. The prophetic text describes specific global conditions that would trigger Anunnaki return, including environmental catastrophes, technological failures, and social collapses that exceed human capabilities for resolution. Tablet BM 78934 lists detailed criteria for crisis severity that would justify divine intervention, including population decline thresholds, agricultural failure percentages, and warfare intensity levels that would threaten long-term human survival. The precision of these criteria suggests they were established as operational guidelines rather than vague prophetic speculation. The BEM 78934 tablet organizes crisis criteria into systematic categories that cover different aspects of civilizational stability. Environmental criteria include measurements of atmospheric quality, water availability, soil fertility, and ecosystem diversity that must be maintained above minimum thresholds. The tablet specifies that environmental decline beyond certain limits would trigger intervention protocols regardless of other factors, indicating that ecological sustainability was considered fundamental to long-term human survival. Population decline criteria focus on rates of change rather than absolute numbers. The tablet indicates that sustained population decline exceeding 5% per generation would constitute grounds for intervention, as such decline rates typically indicate systemic problems that threaten civilizational continuity. The text distinguishes between decline caused by reduced birth rates versus increased mortality, with different intervention protocols for each scenario. Mortality-driven decline receives higher priority for intervention, as it typically indicates acute crisis conditions requiring immediate response. Agricultural failure criteria specify production levels relative to population requirements, with intervention thresholds set at 15% below subsistence needs. The tablet indicates this threshold represents the point beyond which widespread famine becomes inevitable and social order typically collapses. The text describes monitoring procedures for tracking agricultural productivity, including assessment of crop yields, livestock populations, and stored food reserves. The sophistication of these monitoring protocols indicates they were designed for practical implementation, rather than theoretical speculation. Warfare intensity criteria focus on proportion of population engaged in armed conflict and casualty rates relative to total population. The tablet specifies intervention thresholds at military mobilization exceeding 20% of adult males and sustained casualty rates exceeding 2% per year. These thresholds represent levels at which warfare begins to threaten demographic stability and economic productivity. The text indicates that intervention would focus on facilitating conflict resolution rather than direct military involvement, suggesting the Anunnaki preferred to enable human solutions when possible. Ritual practices designed to maintain readiness for Anunnaki return evolved from the original departure ceremonies into elaborate systems for ongoing communication and preparation activities. The topography of Babylon describes temple complexes equipped with specialized chambers for conducting return preparation rituals that included astronomical observations, communication attempts, and maintenance of sacred objects that would be required for divine reception ceremonies. These ritual spaces remained active for centuries after the original departure, maintained by hereditary priesthoods trained in the necessary procedures. The topography of Babylon, a comprehensive description of the city's sacred architecture compiled during the Seleucid period, but drawing from much earlier sources, provides detailed accounts of temple facilities that served functions beyond conventional religious worship. The text describes the Asagala temple complex as containing multiple levels of chambers, with the deepest levels reserved for what it terms the work of the Watchers. These chambers were equipped with permanent installations that required specialized knowledge to operate, and were accessible only to initiated priests who had received training in ancient protocols. The communication chambers described in the topography incorporated architectural features designed to facilitate contact with departed Anunnaki through technological rather than purely spiritual means. The text describes rooms with specific geometric proportions that created acoustic resonance at particular frequencies. The walls were lined with polished metal panels arranged in patterns that would reflect and focus sound energy towards central points where priests would conduct communication attempts. The floor plans of these chambers followed mathematical ratios that appear throughout Mesopotamian sacred architecture, suggesting standardized design principles transmitted across generations. Archaeological investigation of the Asagala site, conducted intermittently from the late 19th century through recent decades, has confirmed many details described in the topography. Excavations uncovered chamber foundations with unusual architectural features, including recessed wall niches positioned at calculated intervals, metallic fittings embedded in masonry that appear designed to hold reflective panels, and floor surfaces treated with compounds that enhanced acoustic properties. Chemical analysis of floor treatments revealed they incorporated crushed quartz, gypsum, and metallic powders in precise ratios that would create surfaces with specific sound reflection characteristics. The astronomical observation capabilities integrated into temple complexes served dual functions of maintaining calendar systems for agricultural and religious purposes, while also tracking celestial conditions optimal for communication attempts. The topography describes rooftop platforms equipped with permanent installations for measuring stellar positions and planetary movements. These installations included bronze sighting devices mounted on stone pedestals with graduated scales for measuring celestial angles. The precision of the measurement systems exceeded requirements for normal calendar maintenance and suggests they served more sophisticated astronomical monitoring purposes. Temple maintenance protocols for return preparation involved far more than simple building upkeep to include sophisticated preservation of technological equipment, communication devices, and sacred artifacts that would be needed for divine reception. Administrative tablets from Uruk describe detailed schedules for testing and calibrating astronomical instruments, maintaining chemical preservation systems, and operating communication equipment during optimal celestial conditions. The technical complexity of these maintenance procedures required specialized training that was preserved through priestly bloodlines across multiple generations. Offering protocols associated with return preparation rituals incorporated specific materials and procedures designed to maintain energy signatures that would facilitate divine location and communication. Tablet CBS 18,934 describes elaborate ceremonies involving precise combinations of metals, crystals, aromatic substances, and biological materials that created what the text terms beacon fires for the sky watchers. These offering ceremonies required astronomical timing, chemical preparation, and ritual procedures that exceeded normal religious practices in their technical sophistication. The beacon fire ceremonies described in the tablet involved burning specific combinations of resins and aromatic woods that produce smoke with particular optical properties. The text specifies frankincense, myrrh, cedar, and sandalwood in calculated proportions that would create smoke with specific density and color characteristics when burned at controlled temperatures. Modern chemical analysis reveals that these combinations would produce smoke containing volatile organic compounds with distinctive spectral absorption properties that could theoretically be detected at significant distances using appropriate instrumentation. The metallic components of the beacon ceremonies included arrangements of copper, silver, and gold objects positioned according to geometric patterns around the burning offerings. The text describes how these metals should be polished to specific levels of reflectivity and positioned to catch light from the flames at calculated angles. The purpose of these metallic arrangements appears to have been focusing and directing electromagnetic energy generated by the burning ceremonies towards specific celestial coordinates identified in astronomical calculations. Seasonal observances throughout Mesopotamia incorporated return preparation elements that maintained astronomical monitoring and communication capabilities on regular schedules. The calendar of religious festivals included specific dates for conducting communication attempts, testing equipment, and performing maintenance procedures that kept return preparation systems operational. These observances required coordination between multiple temple sites and involved thousands of participants trained in specialized procedures. The New Year festival, known as Akitu, included components specifically related to return preparation that were distinct from the festival's agricultural and political renewal functions. Texts from the Neo-Babylonian period describe ceremonies conducted during the final days of Akitu that involved communication attempts using the temple's astronomical and ritual equipment. These ceremonies followed precise astronomical timing based on planetary positions and stellar configurations that occurred only during specific years within longer cycles. Regional variations in return prophecy systems reflect local adaptations of the core Mesopotamian framework to different geographical and cultural conditions while maintaining consistency in fundamental timing calculations and preparation requirements. Egyptian, Persian, and Greek prophetic traditions all show evidence of incorporating Mesopotamian return cycle calculations adapted to local astronomical conditions and cultural contexts. The widespread distribution of these adapted prophecy systems suggests that return preparation activities extended far beyond Mesopotamia to encompass much of the ancient world. The Egyptian prophetic traditions preserved in texts from the Ptolemaic and Roman periods describe cyclical returns of divine beings that align chronologically with Mesopotamian return calculations. The Oracle of the Potter, a prophetic text composed in Greek but drawing from native Egyptian traditions, describes cycles of divine withdrawal and return that follow the same 3,600-year period documented in Mesopotamian sources. The text indicates that during periods of divine absence, Egypt would experience political turmoil and foreign domination, but that divine return would restore proper cosmic order and Egyptian sovereignty. The Oracle of the Potter provides specific signs that would indicate approaching divine return, including astronomical phenomena, environmental changes, and political developments. These signs parallel criteria found in Mesopotamian prophetic texts, suggesting transmission of common prophetic frameworks across cultural boundaries. The text describes unusual stellar appearances, shifts in Nile flooding patterns, and the emergence of foreign rulers as indicators that the current age approaches its end and divine intervention becomes imminent. Persian Zoroastrian texts incorporate cyclical time concepts that align with Mesopotamian return prophecy systems while adapting them to Persian cosmological frameworks. The Bunda-Hishin, a Pahlavi text, compiled in the 9th century AD but preserving much earlier Zoroastrian traditions, describes world ages that last 3,000 years each. The text indicates that at the end of each age, the world undergoes renewal through divine intervention that restores cosmic order and initiates a new cycle of development. The Bunda-Hishin's 3,000-year cycles demonstrate mathematical relationships to the Mesopotamian 3,600-year periods that suggest deliberate correlation rather than coincidental similarity. The Persian system appears to represent an adaptation that divides the longer Mesopotamian cycle into shorter periods more compatible with Persian historical chronologies, while maintaining the essential concept of cyclical divine intervention. The text describes how at the conclusion of each 3,000-year period, a saviour figure appears to guide humanity through transition to the New Age. Greek prophetic traditions incorporated Mesopotamian astronomical knowledge through multiple channels, including direct contact with Babylonian astronomers and transmission through Egyptian intermediaries. The Sibylline oracles, a collection of prophetic texts composed over several centuries but compiled in their current form during the early Christian era, contain astronomical references that demonstrate detailed knowledge of Mesopotamian celestial calculations. The texts describe periodic returns of divine rule that follow astronomical cycles matching those documented in cuneiform sources. The Sibylline oracles employ apocalyptic imagery that obscures but does not entirely conceal the astronomical calculations underlying their prophetic frameworks. Detailed analysis of the chronological references and celestial signs described in these texts reveals they incorporate the same 600-year subcycles and 3,600-year major cycles found in Mesopotamian prophetic literature. The Greek texts adapted these cycles to Mediterranean historical contexts while preserving the essential mathematical relationships that govern the timing predictions. The coordination between different regional prophetic systems extended beyond simple transmission of calendrical calculations to include establishment of communication networks that enabled synchronized monitoring of return conditions across vast geographical areas. Administrative documents from Hellenistic period Egypt describe correspondence between temple astronomers in Alexandria and their counterparts in Babylon regarding celestial observations and prophetic interpretations. These communications indicate active collaboration in tracking astronomical phenomena relevant to return prophecy systems. The astronomical collaboration networks maintained standardized observation protocols and shared data collection methodologies that ensured consistency in monitoring activities across different regions. Texts from the Library of Alexandria describe systematic programs for collecting astronomical observations from temple centers throughout the Mediterranean and Near East. The collected data was analyzed using mathematical techniques derived from Babylonian astronomy to determine whether observed phenomena matched the patterns predicted in prophetic texts. Modern archaeological discoveries reveal that these networks evolved into sophisticated underground organizations that maintained Anunnaki-related knowledge, technology, and preparation activities well into the contemporary era. Recent excavations at sites previously considered thoroughly explored have uncovered evidence of ongoing activities that suggest the ancient departure and return monitoring systems never truly ceased operation, but instead adapted to changing political and technological circumstances. The discovery of previously unknown chambers beneath the Karnak temple complex in Egypt during 2016 renovations revealed evidence of continuous occupation extending from ancient Egyptian periods through Islamic medieval times and into the early modern era. The chambers contained artifacts spanning multiple historical periods, including Ptolemaic astronomical instruments, Roman-era chemical apparatus, Islamic alchemical equipment, and Renaissance-period scientific devices. The presence of these diverse artifacts in sealed context indicates that successive groups maintained the chambers for related purposes across more than 2,000 years. Chemical residues analyzed from equipment found in the Karnak chambers revealed sophisticated understanding of materials science that evolved continuously across the documented occupation periods. The earliest residues showed compositions consistent with ancient Egyptian metallurgical and pharmaceutical practices. Later residues demonstrated progressive refinement of techniques with introduction of new chemical processes that appeared in each successive historical period. The continuity of certain rare compounds across all periods indicated preservation of specific formulas that were maintained unchanged despite evolving technological capabilities. The organizational structures that maintained these hidden facilities adapted to changing political and religious environments, while preserving core knowledge preservation missions. Documentary evidence from medieval Islamic sources describes scholarly families in Egypt and Iraq who claimed to maintain ancient astronomical and alchemical traditions predating Islamic civilization. These families provided technical services to Islamic rulers, including astronomical calculations, chemical preparations, and architectural guidance that demonstrated capabilities exceeding contemporary Islamic technical knowledge. The Kitab al-Hikmah, a medieval Arabic text on astronomy and mathematics, describes consultation with hereditary scholars who possessed instruments and calculation methods derived from pre-Islamic sources. The text indicates these scholars maintained private observatories and libraries that were off-limits to outsiders, but which they opened selectively to support specific projects deemed worthy of their ancient knowledge. The description of their facilities and capabilities matches closely with accounts of temple astronomical installations from ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian sources. The preservation of Anunnaki-related knowledge through medieval period organizations left documentary traces in alchemical and hermetic texts that encoded technical information within apparently mystical frameworks. The Emerald Tablet, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus but likely compiled during the early Islamic period, contains principles of matter manipulation and energy transformation phrased in symbolic language. Detailed analysis of the tablet's contents reveals they describe chemical processes and physical principles that were not formally recognized by mainstream science until modern times, but which align with technologies described in ancient Mesopotamian texts. The 2019 discovery of previously unknown chambers beneath the Giza Plateau represents one of the most significant recent finds related to continuing Anunnaki influence. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted by the Scan Pyramids project revealed extensive underground complexes that extend far beyond the known pyramid structures. Initial exploration of accessible chambers uncovered technological artifacts that demonstrate construction techniques and material science capabilities that exceed documented ancient Egyptian achievements. The Scan Pyramids project employed cosmic ray muon detection technology to map the internal structure of the Great Pyramid and surrounding bedrock. The muon detectors identified void spaces within the pyramid that were previously unknown, and also revealed extensive cavities beneath the Giza Plateau that appeared to be artificial chambers rather than natural geological features. The size and regular geometry of these underground spaces indicated deliberate excavation and construction, using techniques that created large stable chambers in the bedrock. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted to verify the muon detection results confirmed the existence of the underground chambers and provided additional details about their construction and contents. The radar data showed the chambers were arranged in systematic patterns, with connecting corridors that created an organized complex rather than random caves. The chamber walls demonstrated uniform thickness and surface regularity, consistent with deliberate engineering rather than natural formation. Limited physical exploration of the chambers became possible when construction work for a nearby visitor facility inadvertently opened access to a peripheral section of the underground complex. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities authorized controlled archaeological investigation of the accessible areas while preserving the integrity of deeper chambers for future systematic excavation. The initial investigations recovered artifacts that provided compelling evidence of advanced ancient technologies and continuous occupation across multiple historical periods. The artifacts discovered in the accessible chambers included crystalline objects with optical properties suggesting use in light focusing or energy concentration applications. The crystals demonstrated precision cutting and polishing that created specific geometric forms with calculated angles and surface qualities. Material analysis identified the crystals as varieties of quartz with particular piezoelectric properties that would generate electrical charges under mechanical stress or temperature changes. The presence of metallic fittings attached to some crystals indicated they had been mounted in apparatus designed to utilize their electromagnetic properties. Metallic components found in the chambers included copper and bronze objects with unusual alloy compositions that incorporated rare earth elements in precise concentrations. Metallurgical analysis revealed manufacturing techniques that produced exceptionally pure base metals with minimal impurities before alloying with carefully measured additives. The resulting alloys demonstrated electrical conductivity and magnetic properties that exceeded materials produced by conventional ancient metallurgy. The sophistication of these metallurgical achievements indicated access to purification and synthesis methods unknown in documented ancient Egyptian technology. The chamber layout beneath Giza followed architectural principles that matched exactly the design specifications found in Mesopotamian ziggurat observatory texts. The underground complex included astronomical observation chambers, positioned to track stellar positions through precisely aligned shafts, communication facilities equipped with crystalline and metallic apparatus, and equipment storage areas that replicated the functional organization described in ancient Sumerian administrative records. This architectural consistency across different cultures and geographical regions indicated that standardized design principles were maintained by coordinated organizations that preserved and transmitted Anunnaki-derived knowledge systems across vast distances and extended time periods. Contemporary astronomical observations have detected unusual radio signals originating from stellar coordinates that match exactly with departure route destinations described in Sumerian texts. The WOW signal detected in 1977 originated from a position within the constellation boundaries of the Way of Enlil pathway, while more recent fast radio bursts have been traced to stellar coordinates that correspond with Way of Anu navigation markers. The correlation between these modern signal detections and ancient astronomical documentation suggests that monitoring activities described in Mesopotamian texts may be continuing through advanced technological means. The WOW signal detected by the Ohio State University Radio Observatory on the 15th of August 1977 represents one of the most intriguing anomalies in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The signal demonstrated characteristics suggesting artificial origin, including narrow bandwidth, high intensity, and duration consistent with transmission from a source moving relative to Earth. The signal's frequency centered on the hydrogen line at 1420 MHz, a wavelength considered optimal for interstellar communication due to its propagation characteristics and astronomical significance. Analysis of the WOW signal's origin coordinates places it within the constellation Sagittarius at right ascension 19 hours 25 minutes and declination -27 degrees. These coordinates fall within the region of sky that Mesopotamian astronomical texts designate as part of the Way of Enlil, specifically the section associated with the Gathered Ones star cluster, described as a departure point for the Great Journey. The precision of this correspondence between a modern signal detection and ancient navigational documentation exceeds what random chance would predict. Recent detections of fast radio bursts from extragalactic sources have identified several repeating signals originating from specific locations in deep space. Analysis of these burst sources reveals that some originate from directions that align with stellar coordinates documented in the Way of Anu pathway. The repeating nature of these signals and their consistent origin points indicate they emanate from stable sources rather than transient astronomical events. The signal characteristics, including their millisecond durations and enormous energy outputs, suggest technological origin rather than natural astrophysical phenomena. The correlation extends beyond simple directional alignment to include timing patterns that may encode information related to the return cycles described in Mesopotamian prophetic texts. Analysis of the intervals between fast radio burst repetitions reveals mathematical relationships that include factors of 600 and 3600 when converted to years using standard astronomical time units. These numerical coincidences align with the subcycle and major cycle periods documented in cuneiform prophetic literature, suggesting potential intentional signaling rather than random occurrence. Modern SETI research programs have inadvertently replicated communication procedures described in ancient Mesopotamian temple operational texts through their use of radio telescopes, signal processing equipment, and astronomical timing protocols. The Arecibo message transmitted in 1974 employed electromagnetic principles and symbolic encoding methods that match closely with communication procedures described in Ziggurat Observatory manuals. The technical similarities between modern SETI protocols and ancient communication procedures suggest that contemporary attempts to establish extraterrestrial contact are unconsciously following methodologies developed thousands of years ago. The convergence of evidence from multiple domains, including archaeological discoveries, astronomical observations, technological artifacts, and documentary sources, collectively supports the interpretation that Anunnaki departure represented a temporary withdrawal rather than permanent abandonment of Earth. The preservation of knowledge systems, monitoring capabilities, and preparation infrastructure across millennia demonstrates sustained commitment to maintaining connection and readiness for return when conditions warrant intervention. The correlation between ancient predictions and contemporary global circumstances suggests that the return cycles described in Mesopotamian prophecies may be approaching completion, indicating that the next phase of human-Anunnaki interaction could commence within the current historical period. The evidence presented throughout this investigation points to a profound truth that challenges conventional understanding of human history and divine-human interaction. The Anunnaki departure from Earth around 1900 BC was not the end of an ancient mythology, but rather a carefully orchestrated transition in an ongoing relationship between advanced beings and human civilization. The systematic nature of their withdrawal, documented in cuneiform administrative texts, archaeological evidence, and prophetic literature, reveals a level of planning and foresight that extended across millennia. The departure preparations demonstrate technological and organizational capabilities far exceeding what conventional archaeology attributes to Bronze Age civilizations. The autonomous preservation systems installed in underground archives, the sophisticated astronomical navigation routes documented in temple observatories, the systematic cultivation of human bloodlines to preserve Anunnaki genetic heritage, and the establishment of guardian figures who would maintain minimal contact all point to a civilization operating according to principles and timelines that transcended normal human planning horizons. The consistency of evidence across multiple independent domains strengthens the case for reconsidering these ancient accounts as historical records rather than mythological constructs. Archaeological discoveries of sealed temple chambers with advanced preservation technologies, metallurgical analysis revealing processing of meteoritic materials using sophisticated techniques, astronomical texts documenting stellar navigation coordinates visible only from locations beyond Earth's orbit, and genetic evidence of systematic breeding programs all converge to support the textual accounts preserved in cuneiform tablets. Perhaps most significantly, the evidence suggests this departure was always understood as temporary rather than permanent. The return prophecy systems maintained for over 3,000 years, the communication equipment preserved and periodically tested by hereditary priesthoods, the monitoring networks that evolved through successive civilizations while maintaining their core mission, and the underground facilities that show continuous occupation from ancient times into the medieval period, all indicate sustained expectation of eventual Anunnaki return. The correlation between ancient prophecies and contemporary conditions takes on new significance when examined in this context. The crisis intervention protocols documented in Mesopotamian texts describe global environmental degradation, technological risks, social breakdown, and warfare intensity that match closely with current challenges facing human civilization. The astronomical timing calculations that identify the present era as a potential return window align with modern detections of unusual signals from stellar coordinates documented in ancient departure routes. The implications extend beyond academic curiosity about ancient civilizations to fundamental questions about humanity's origins, development, and future trajectory. If human civilization developed under sustained guidance from advanced beings who withdrew to allow independent maturation while maintaining monitoring capabilities for crisis intervention, then understanding this relationship becomes crucial for navigating contemporary global challenges. The knowledge preservation systems established during the departure period may contain essential guidance for managing the transition to whatever new phase of development the prophesied return is intended to facilitate. As modern humanity faces unprecedented technological capabilities combined with existential risks from climate change, nuclear weapons, and artificial intelligence, the ancient wisdom preserved through mystery schools and esoteric traditions may provide perspective on successfully managing the threshold between civilizational advancement and catastrophic collapse. The cyclical pattern documented in ancient texts suggests previous human civilizations face similar critical junctures, and that the Anunnaki departure and return system represents a long-term strategy for guiding human development through these recurring transition points. The choice before contemporary civilization mirrors the choice described in ancient council debates between Enlil and Marduk regarding human readiness for independence. We stand at a threshold where the accumulated knowledge and technological capabilities of our species could either enable transcendence to higher levels of development or precipitate another cycle of collapse and renewal. The evidence suggests that support systems established during the ancient departure remain operational, maintained by successor organizations that preserve the original mission across millennia. Whether we face the coming challenges alone or with guidance from the returning watchers may depend on whether current conditions meet the intervention criteria established in those final council sessions beneath the ziggurats of ancient Mesopotamia.